What's up guys, welcome to AnimeKouhai. If you want to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
For example, let's say a dangerous monster appeared somewhere. The Free Guild, a lower branch of the council, was tasked with dealing with it, so the council would send a formal request to deploy adventurers to the area. But of course, there might be more than one monster, and they could be threatening more than one country. The more powerful nations would likely act to procure stronger adventurers for their own country first, that was a given. Sending more funding to the council indicated that you were a more valuable presence among the Western nations. There was no point diverting limited resources to protecting something useless. Countries with excess capacity could help, but otherwise, they'd be shut out. That was the reality of it. The weak were given the cold shoulder on an equal basis from everyone, in a very cruel game of numbers. This was why being late with your share of contributions was never allowed. The minimum contributions were always collected, and anyone who couldn't make the payments was booted out of the council. To the weaker nations, that was a matter of life and death. It meant nobody would help them if things went south. It was the council's job to make those decisions as well, so it was a given that countries with more councillors had a lot more power in the group. These contributions, of course, weren't cheap. They piled up based on the number of representatives you sent, so even a superpower like Farmus could only send around 5, at most. The fall of Farmus was thus a huge event, nothing the council could afford to ignore. Between figuring out how to handle the new kingdom of Farminus and addressing the rise of the troublesome Jura Tempest Federation, tensions were understandably high around the council right now. After the Tempest Founders Festival, the council held a special session that quickly erupted into chaos, with representatives yelling at one another until they were hoarse. Hinata Sakaguchi attended as a guest of honor, given her close relationship with the Demon Lord Rimuru. She could have turned down the invite. Unlike the Free Guild, the Western Holy Church wasn't a subgroup of the council. They were on friendly terms but existed as completely different structures. As a leading figure in that organization, Hinata had every right to ignore the summons. But when she heard the council's subject matter, she decided to join in. They were set to discuss Tempest's admission into the council, a resolution that could greatly affect the future direction of the Western nations, and considering that, Hinata couldn't stay away. The current chaotic disorder in the council made her wince a little. When you collect a bunch of fools together, it's not surprising how little work gets done. Hinata led all of her own meetings, keeping decision-making as quick as possible without things falling too far out of hand. A serious enough disagreement, after all, could always be decided with battle, such was her philosophy. And in the conferences in Tempest she attended, they always managed to decide on vast, pondering matters, even with all the big names that constantly seemed to join in. It was hard for Hinata to comprehend, like something out of a fairy tale. But even if that's a notable exception, she mused, couldn't this council be a little more constructive? To someone like Hinata, who mostly attended active, useful meetings, the debate unfolding before her seemed like nothing short of a farce.
We can trust that nation. I feel we should exert all efforts to welcome them as our friends.
You say that, but we are talking about a demon lord here. Allegedly, he can negotiate with the storm dragon, but if we anger him, what if he sets that menace on us?
No need to worry about that. I doubt this demon lord has much power himself. He's just leaning on his buddy to posture against his foes.
Ridiculous. Then how do you explain the draw that he and Lady Hinata here fought to? Because I think we should appreciate this demon lord for the strength he's clearly shown.
It was a never-ending torrent of unintelligent opinions thrown against one another. This is so stupid. How can they even keep this going in my presence? Their thoughtlessness is astounding. Hinata was right about that, and yet they were arguing over whether the demon lord was a juggernaut or a pushover. It certainly left an impression on her.
Look, the demon lord Rimuru has declared that the lands of the forest of Jura are his territory. At the same time, however, he stated at the Founders' Festival that he has no intention of sending monsters out to the forest's borders. This means a lot. Counselors, we need to consider that as we work toward a conclusion.
Indeed. Our nation is home to a people living in constant fear of monsters. The Demon Lord's statement provides salvation to them, and it is backed by fact as well. Ever since the founding of Tempest, monster-related incidents have been on a steady decline.
Nonsense. Has the demon lord deceived you?
The forest of Jura's monsters were managed by the demon lord Rimuru. The nations nestled along its vast border were already reaping the benefits. But whether a nation bordered Tempest, was exposed to other threats, or was located relatively safely inland, they all had different motives driving them. The border nations here were the most welcoming to Rimuru's reign. They had all participated in the Founders' Festival, getting a taste of Tempest's prosperity for themselves. Whether it was a nation of monsters or not, they reasoned, if it could directly connect to their own national interests, then bring it on. Countries facing other threats, meanwhile, had trouble deciding how to approach this. They had the Free Guild and the Crusaders to protect them and deal with monster damage. None of these nations were large in scale, and none could afford to act carelessly here. They were all in the same boat, largely, and they had their hands full staying afloat as it was. The more quick-witted among their leaders were already scheming to see how they could take advantage of Tempest, but some of them skipped the Founders' Festival entirely and had no inherent trust of monsters. The debate over Rimuru raged among these nations, and no matter which side they went with, their position was a pretty weak one. Finally, the larger, safer nations, and the countries dependent on them, were, as a rule, approving. They, of course, had the luxury of tackling this question based on how they stood to profit from it. Security was not a concern of theirs. They were countered by counselors who were more skeptical about Rimuru's policies. If something were to happen, the Demon Lord might decide to place the full brunt of his powers upon them, such was their blind belief, and they were thus virulently opposed to him. Some were already loudly accusing the Tempest border nations of turning traitor and letting Rimuru brainwash them. With all these clashing interests, it was a given that the meeting would be a rowdy one. From the perspective of a higher power, it was all the work of fools, but most of the representatives were just looking out for number one. Hinata knew that, which was why she could stay silent.
All right, why don't we accept their argument? If they say Tempest will be our friend, then let's welcome them in. But they'll need to bring some gifts with them.
I firmly agree. Try to fight them, and we'll just have another Pharmus on our hands.
They'll need to learn their place, though. Do we even know if they have any interest in respecting the international laws we've put in place?
I don't think we need to worry about that. You've heard the rumors about Duke Muse's folly, I trust?
How could anyone not have?
The real bottleneck was due to the representatives from the rich nations. They were well informed to start with, and they were deliberately trying to stir the pot here, encouraging the chaos. Their objective was clear, they already made their conclusion, and now they wanted to guide everyone else toward it without seeming too unnatural. I feel for the smaller nations' representatives. They were oblivious when they came here, and now they're faced with a choice. They may as well throw their vote down the drain. Ignorance really is a sin. Without the correct information, you stood to lose a vast amount. And now the weak were being hounded into letting their precious vote go to waste. Still, but I suppose this is all leading up to Tempest getting accepted. Which is fine by me, but the larger nations shared the same motives as Hinata. It was a pity about the citizens of the weaker countries, but as she saw it, better to keep her mouth shut about this. She did need to resist the urge to speak up, though.
The Demon Lord Rimuru's motives here don't really matter. The question is whether we can make good use of him or not.
Precisely. Given our present concern about the East's movements, there's no reason to turn down a Demon Lord's power if he allies with us.
Prince Johann Rostia, one of the senior representatives in the council, was now bringing up the Eastern Empire.
The East, you say? Meaning the Empire?
There are movements, but Veldora is right next to us, in the forest of Jura.
Johann's statement caused a stir among the council. Now, Hinata thought, we're getting down to business. The preamble went on far too long, but that's nobles for you. They were feeling one another out, gauging how much information each side had on them. Once they were sure their side had the upper hand, that's when they bared their fangs. That was their style, just as Johann showed when he so expertly seized the initiative.
As I'm sure you're all aware, the military of the Eastern Empire, namely, the Nazca Namrium Ulmeria United Eastern Empire, has begun making certain maneuvers. According to reports from passing merchants, they've been conducting military exercises at a higher rate than before.
The council fell silent at Johann's words. Hinata was aware of that, as were Gazel Dwargo and the heads of the other nations bordering the empire. They probably kept tabs on the empire through the sales of their healing potions and equipment. Since the Dwarven Kingdom was officially neutral, Gazel was no doubt following his obligations to keep what he knew confidential. Plus, Rimuru undoubtedly knew as well. The proof was in the tech announcements he made at the Founders' Festival. Rimuru insisted that, no, that was really all Gabbles and Vester's own work, and so on, but that was a barefaced lie. He had to be involved, too, and he meant his statement as a threat against Gazel. Not a threat exactly, perhaps, but it was Rimuru way of saying, hey, Tempest is making the potions now. You can never underestimate him. He knows what's going on in the east, and he's needling Gazel about keeping quiet. How far ahead is he looking? It's just amazing to me. Thus, whether he knew it or not, Rimuru was being vastly misunderstood by Hinata here in Anglacia. Now, while all of this might have been known information to Hinata, it was shocking news to the majority of counselors here. Everyone sat on the edge of their seats, waiting for more from Johann. They needed as much information as they could as they debated how to protect themselves. Nations rich enough to have regular armies were one thing, but the smaller ones didn't even have the free budget to retain one of those. Small scale was the watchword with their militaries. They preferred to hire mercenaries at times of war, but if the whole region was building up their firepower, they'd be facing pretty slim pickings.
Everyone.
Johann said in a voice that carried well across the chamber.
Calm down. I'm not saying the Empire will make their move at once. Let us keep our heads cool and debate how to respond.
Just as Hinata thought, this was the real topic of the day.
And what will we do?
One representative asked, followed by many others.
How to respond? What measures do we even have against them?
The kingdom of Pharmus is gone. Even if we wanted to build a defensive line, we can't do that with just us smaller nations.
Order, please. The Empire isn't on the move because of you-know-who in the forest of Jura. I wouldn't be as assured if he was still sealed away, but now he's alive and active for us.
Wait one moment. You want us to pin our hopes on that evil dragon?
Please, I'm telling you, calm down. Right now, if the news is to be trusted, Veldora has been tamed by Sir Rimuru, the Demon Lord. The very same Demon Lord who seeks admission to our council, am I right? Then I think the answer is clear.
That's it for this video, guys. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shoutout to IceB, Psycho Cat, Pickle Rick, Assassin139, Mr. Jaha, Rahul Subramanian, Fennec Foxy, Demonite Boy, Spidey Grapple Master, and last but not least, shoutout to Carla Ramirez. I'll see you guys in the next video.